It was 1:53 a.m. in the Strait of Hormuz, and the water between the Omani coast and the Iranian shore was exactly 21 nautical miles wide at its narrowest point. 21 miles. The distance a motivated jogger could cover in 3 hours on flat ground. The distance through which, on any given day, 17 million barrels of crude oil transit aboard tankers, LNG carriers, and bulk vessels moving in designated traffic separation lanes that were established precisely because 21 miles is not a lot of room for the volume of traffic the strait handles. It is the most important 21 miles of ocean on Earth by almost any economic metric you choose to apply. Close the Strait of Hormuz and you do not inconvenience the global energy market. You detonate it. Tehran knows this. Tehran has known it since the tanker war of the 1980s, when Iranian forces first demonstrated the willingness to use the strait as a strategic weapon, mining the shipping lanes, attacking tankers with silkworm missiles, sending IRGC speedboats against vessels that had nothing to do with the Iran-Iraq conflict except the misfortune of transiting water that Iran had decided was a battlefield. The United States Navy has known it too, since the same period when Operation Earnest Will and Operation Praying Mantis established the precedent that American naval forces would escort tankers through the strait, clear mines from the shipping lanes, and impose whatever cost was necessary on Iranian forces that attempted to close the world's most critical maritime choke point. That precedent has never been rescinded. It has only been reinforced, operation by operation, decade by decade, until the institutional memory of the U.S. Navy's presence in the Arabian Gulf region is older than most of the sailors currently serving in it. USS Devastator, MCM-6, is a mine countermeasures vessel, one of the 14 Avenger-class ships in the U.S. Navy's dedicated mine warfare force. She is not glamorous. She displaces only 1,312 tons, carries no missiles, no torpedoes, no offensive weapons of any kind beyond a 12.7mm machine gun mount on her bow, and the small arms her crew is issued for personal defense. She is built from fiberglass and wood, non-magnetic construction materials chosen specifically to avoid triggering the pressure and magnetic fuses of the naval mines she exists to find and neutralize. She is slow, uncomfortable in any sea state above moderate, and entirely unimpressive to any observer whose definition of naval power runs toward aircraft carriers and guided missile destroyers. She is also absolutely essential to the continued functioning of global energy markets, because without her and ships like her, the Strait of Hormuz shipping lanes cannot be guaranteed safe for the tanker traffic that keeps a significant portion of the world's electricity generation and transportation infrastructure running. On the night of this operation, Devastator was not alone. Operating 8 nautical miles to her northeast, USS Hurricane, PC-3, a Cyclone-class coastal patrol craft, was running a surface surveillance pattern along the northern edge of the inbound shipping lane. 2 MH-60R Seahawk helicopters from HSM-75, the Wolf Pack, were airborne from a forward operating base at Qeshm Island, Oman, conducting coordinated surface and subsurface surveillance of the Strait's central channel. A P-8A Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft was orbiting at 18,000 feet, its AN/APS-154 Advanced Airborne Sensor, a wide-area maritime surveillance radar and electro-optical system capable of detecting surface contacts down to the size of a floating mine casing, painting the strait from shore to shore in overlapping swaths. And, invisible to everything on or above the surface, a Navy MQ-8C Fire Scout unmanned helicopter was running a low-level infrared patrol along the southern edge of the inbound lane, Its sensors, looking for the thermal signature of recently placed mine casings in water that is warm enough to make a cold metal object distinctly visible against the background temperature gradient. This was not a reaction to an intelligence tip. This was a Tuesday night in the Strait of Hormuz during a period of elevated tension. It was routine. This is what the U.S. Navy does when Tehran's rhetoric reaches a certain temperature, and the satellite imagery of IRGC, naval bases on Qeshm Island, shows an unusual level of small craft activity at the mine storage facility that American intelligence has been tracking since 2008. You surge the assets, you increase the patrol tempo, you make sure that if someone is going to put mines in the world's most important shipping lane, they're going to do it with the full attention of everything the U.S. Navy can point at the strait on a short notice. At 1:53 a.m., the P-8A's APS-154 registered an anomaly. 3 small surface contacts moving at low speed, approximately 6 knots, from the direction of Qeshm Island toward the center of the inbound shipping lane. The contacts were small. Their radar cross-sections were consistent with rigid hull inflatable boats or small fiberglass craft. They were moving without navigation lights. In the Strait of Hormuz, small craft moving without lights at 2 a.m. from the direction of an Iranian island with a known mine storage facility toward the center of the international shipping lane are not an ambiguous intelligence picture. The P-8A crew classified the contacts as probable. IRGC mine-laying boats within 4 minutes of first detection and pushed the track data to the CTF-52 Operations Center, the U.S. Navy's Mine Countermeasures Task Force headquartered in Bahrain, and to every asset in the strait simultaneously via Link 16. The IRGC mine-laying operation had been in planning for weeks. The operational concept was not complicated because it did not need to be. Place a field of IRGC manufactured bottom mines, the EM-52 rocket-propelled mine, a weapon that sits on the sea floor and fires an upward-directed warhead when a ship passes overhead. Across the inbound shipping lane at a point where the channel narrows and ships cannot deviate significantly from the lane center line without running into shallow water. Detonate 1 or 2 tankers. Announce the minefield. Watch the insurance market for Gulf tanker transit collapse overnight and the oil price spike in ways that serve Iranian strategic objectives without requiring a declared act of war that would invite immediate and overwhelming retaliation. The concept was sound in the abstract. The execution required getting 3 boats loaded with naval mines across 21 miles of strait that the United States Navy was watching with. At that moment, a P-8A maritime patrol aircraft, 2 MH-60R Seahawk helicopters, a Fire Scout unmanned helicopter, a mine countermeasures vessel, a coastal patrol craft, and a signals intelligence architecture that had been collecting IRGC naval communications since the planning phase of the operation began. The IRGC mine-laying crews were good at their jobs. They had trained for this. They had done it before, in exercises, in the dark, in fast boats that handled well, and crews that knew the strait's currents and depths. What they had not trained against, what their operational planning had not adequately incorporated, was an adversary that could see them from 18,000 feet with a radar system sensitive enough to detect a floating mine casing, track their boats' movements in real time via satellite-linked data networks, and vector response assets to their position before they had placed their first mine on the bottom. At 2:01 a.m., the lead MH-60R Seahawk, Wolf 11, received the P-8A's track data and turned toward the contact group at maximum speed. The MH-60R is the U.S. Navy's primary anti-surface and anti-submarine helicopter, a platform that traces its lineage to the MH-60R Seahawk, but has been so comprehensively upgraded in sensors, weapons, and data systems that it shares little with its ancestor beyond the basic airframe. Wolf 11 carried two AGM-114 Hellfire missiles on its port weapons station, a .50 caliber M3M machine gun on the starboard door mount, and the AN/APS-153 multimode radar in its nose, a surface search system capable of detecting small boats at ranges well beyond the darkness that the IRGC crews were relying on for concealment. The Seahawk had the 3 IRGC boats on radar at 2:06 a.m., range 7.4 nautical miles. At 2:09 a.m., Wolf 11's crew had visual confirmation through the AN/AAS-44C electro-optical/infrared sensor. 3 rigid hull inflatable boats, each approximately 9 meters in length, each carrying what the infrared imagery showed as multiple cylindrical objects consistent with naval mine casings stacked along the center of the hull. The boats were 2.3 nautical miles from the center line of the inbound shipping lane. They had not yet begun placing mines. They were still in the approach phase, running at 6 knots, their crews apparently unaware that a Seahawk helicopter had them on radar and infrared from 7 nautical miles and was closing at 130 knots. The rules of engagement for IRGC, mine-laying interdiction operations in the Strait of Hormuz, are not ambiguous. An Iranian naval or paramilitary vessel placing naval mines in an international shipping lane is committing an act of aggression against the international maritime community, a violation of international law, and a direct threat to the freedom of navigation that the United States Navy is tasked with defending. The presence of mine casings on the boats was confirmed by imagery. The location, converging on the inbound shipping lane from an Iranian military island without navigation lights at 2 a.m., was unambiguous as to intent. Authorization for interdiction had been obtained from CTF-52 at 2:07 a.m., 2 minutes after radar contact and 2 minutes before visual confirmation of the mine casings. Wolf 11 established radio contact with the lead IRGC boat at 2:11 a.m., broadcasting in Farsi on the International Distress Frequency and on frequencies known to be monitored by IRGC naval forces. Armed U.S. naval helicopter ordered the boats to stop, drop any equipment being carried, and prepare to be boarded or depart Iranian territorial waters immediately. The broadcast was made twice, with a pause between repetitions. The IRGC crew's response was to increase speed. The boats accelerated from 6 knots to approximately 22 knots and turned south, attempting to break away from the helicopter's position. 2 of the 3 boats began pushing mine casings over the side as they ran, trying to complete enough of their mission to claim some operational success while escaping the helicopter. The mine casings hitting the water was the end of any ambiguity that remained. Wolf 11's crew watched the mine casings enter the water on their infrared sensor, logged the GPS coordinates of each entry point for subsequent mine clearance operations, and reported to CTF-52. CTF-52 authorized weapons free. Wolf 11's pilot brought the Seahawk to a stable hover at 800 feet and 1.2 nautical miles from the lead IRGC boat and fired the first AGM-114 Hellfire missile. The Hellfire is a laser-guided weapon with a 9-kilogram shaped charge warhead, designed for anti-armor use, but thoroughly proven in anti-surface operations, where its penetrating warhead transfers kinetic and thermal energy to a small boat's hull and machinery with effects that are comprehensive and immediate. The first Hellfire covered 1.2 nautical miles in 4.1 seconds and struck the lead boat's engine compartment. The fuel tank detonated in the secondary explosion. The lead IRGC boat and everything aboard it ceased to exist as an operational entity at 2:13 a.m. The second Seahawk, Wolf 12, had been closing from the northwest at 2:09 a.m. when the IRGC boats began their run. Wolf 12 carried the same weapons loadout as Wolf 11 and had the two remaining IRGC boats on radar. As Wolf 11 engaged the lead boat, Wolf 12 positioned against the second boat, which had turned hard east and was pushing its remaining mine casings into the water as fast as its crew could handle them. Wolf 12's door gunner engaged with the M3M .50 caliber machine gun at 600 meters range, a weapons choice that allowed precision engagement against the boat's crew and hull without the risk of sympathetically detonating the mine casings that were still aboard, which would have created an uncontrolled explosion in a crowded waterway. The .50 caliber rounds punched through the boat's fiberglass hull at the waterline. The second IRGC boat slowed, settled by the stern, and began taking on water. Its crew, 3 men, abandoned it and entered the water. Wolf 12 maintained observation of the crew in the water and reported their position for subsequent recovery operations. The third IRGC boat had turned north the moment the first Hellfire fired, pushing at maximum speed toward the Iranian territorial water boundary. USS Hurricane, which had been accelerating toward the engagement area since the P-8A's initial contact report, was now 4.1 nautical miles northwest of the fleeing boat and closing at 35 knots. The Cyclone-class patrol craft is not fast by naval standards, but is considerably faster than a 9-meter rigid hull inflatable loaded with mine casings trying to make the Iranian shoreline. The Hurricane's crew broadcast warnings on all IRGC naval frequencies as they closed. The third boat did not stop. At 2,200 meters range, Hurricane's Mark 38 25mm cannon mount engaged the fleeing boat's engine compartment with a short burst. The boat stopped. Its crew, 4 men, abandoned it. Hurricane maneuvered alongside and its boarding team, weapons drawn, secured the boat and the 4 IRGC personnel in the water within 8 minutes. By 2:31 a.m., the mine-laying operation was over. 38 minutes from first detection to final interdiction. 1 IRGC boat destroyed, 1 sunk, 1 captured. 4 IRGC personnel recovered from the water and taken into custody. 3 personnel from the second boat recovered and detained. The crew of the lead boat were not recoverable. 11 mine casings had entered the water during the engagement, and their GPS entry coordinates had been logged in real time by Wolf 11's sensor system. USS Devastator, which had been repositioning toward the engagement area since 2:03 a.m., arrived on scene at 2:47 a.m. and began the mine clearance operation with her AN/SLQ 48 mine neutralization system, a remotely operated underwater vehicle that identifies, photographs, and places explosive charges on naval mines within 9 minutes of arrival. The 11 mines were neutralized over the following 4 hours without incident. The inbound shipping lane of the Strait of Hormuz was declared clear for normal traffic at 7:15 a.m. The first tanker transited the cleared lane at 7:44 a.m., 31 minutes after the all-clear, carrying 270,000 metric tons of Saudi crude oil toward the Suez Canal. Her master knew nothing of what had happened in the lane he was transiting 6 hours earlier. He did not need to know. He needed the lane to be clear. It was clear. That is the entire point. In Tehran, the IRGC Naval Command faced the task of accounting for 2 boats, 11 crew members, and an operation that had produced 0 mines successfully placed in the shipping lane, and had instead generated a U.S. Navy intelligence windfall. The 4 captured IRGC personnel were debriefed by CTF. 52 intelligence officers under the provisions of the law of armed conflict applicable to captured combatants conducting offensive operations. The 2 recovered boats were inspected for technical intelligence, and the mine casings neutralized by the Devastator were examined before destruction and found to be EM. 52 variants with updated fusing systems that the U.S. Navy's mine countermeasures community was very interested to photograph and analyze in detail. Iranian state media reported the night's events as a routine patrol by IRGC naval forces in the Persian Gulf region. There was no mention of the boats, no mention of the crew, no mention of the Hellfire missile that had lit up the strait at 2:13 a.m., brightly enough to be visible from the Omani coast. The insurance market for tanker transit through the strait noted the U.S. Navy's rapid interdiction response and the confirmation that American mine countermeasures assets were actively patrolling the shipping lanes and the war risk premium for Hormuz transit, which had briefly spiked in the hours after fragmentary reports of the incident reached the shipping community, returned to near baseline levels within 36 hours. The Strait of Hormuz remained open. It will remain open as long as the USS Devastator and ships like her are there to keep it open, as long as MH-60R Seahawks are airborne over the strait at 2 a.m., as long as P-8A Poseidons are orbiting at 18,000 feet painting the water with radar that sees mine casings floating in the shipping lane. Tehran's strategic calculus about using the strait as a weapon has been tested repeatedly against the reality of what the United States Navy has positioned to counter exactly that strategy, and the result has been the same every time. The lane stays open, the mines get cleared or never placed, and the IRGC crews who go into the strait with mine casings in their boats discover that 21 miles of water is not nearly enough room to hide an operation from an adversary that has been watching those 21 miles continuously for 40 years, 38 minutes. That is how long it took to find, track, intercept, neutralize, and clear the product of weeks of IRGC mine-laying planning. The oil kept moving. The world kept running. And somewhere on the bottom of the strait, 11 EM-52 mine casings sat inert in the silt. Their fusing systems already photographed, analyzed, and incorporated into the ever-growing American library of Iranian mine warfare technology. Because every weapon Iran deploys in the Strait of Hormuz, whether it succeeds or fails, teaches the United States Navy something. And the United States Navy does not forget what it learns. Bye for now.